This is Land of Havilah, 1 Chronicles 13. This is the story of David's first attempt to bring the ark to Jerusalem. It didn't go well. Verse 1. David consulted with the captains of thousands and of hundreds, even with every leader. David said to all the assembly of Israel, "If it seems good to you, and if it is of Yahweh our God, let's send word everywhere to our brothers who are left in all the land of Israel, with whom the priests and the Levites are in their cities that have their pasture lands, that they may gather themselves to us. Also let's bring the ark of our God back to us again, for we didn't seek it in the days of Saul." All the assembly said that they would do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. Comment: that makes no sense without reading the law of Moses in 1 and 2 Samuel. Yahweh was present with the ark, Exodus 25:22. The rightful place of the ark had always been in the tabernacle. However, in the days leading up to David, when Samuel was a little boy, Israel was corrupt, and Yahweh distanced himself from Israel, which he symbolized to them by allowing the ark to be captured by the Philistines. That set up an obvious barrier between Yahweh and Israel, such that Israel was no longer confident that Yahweh would listen to them or help them. Yahweh's withdrawal was called Ichabod, which means the glory has departed. The Philistines took the ark home, but they had to keep moving it from city to city in Philistia because everywhere it went there was a plague and death. When that fact became crystal clear to them, they sent the ark back to Israel on an ox cart. The oxen pulled the cart back to Israel without the benefit of a human driver, which meant that Yahweh himself was returning the ark. The cart arrived at Beth Shemesh of Israel, but the Israelites there treated it with disrespect by opening it and looking into it. An astounding 50,070 of them died. The men of Beth Shemesh called for their Israelite neighbors at Kiriath Jearim to come take the ark off their hands. And amazingly, the citizens of Kiriath Jearim agreed. The ark stayed in that city for over 20 years in the house of one Abinadab, and, quote, all the house of Israel lamented after Yahweh, 1 Samuel 7:2. So the ark was back, but it was obvious Yahweh was still angry with them. Israel was afraid to move the ark back into the tabernacle. The ark stayed in Abinadab's house in Kiriath Jearim for 20 years, until David and Israel decided to move it to Jerusalem in verses 1 to 4 above. The idea was that Yahweh would come to Jerusalem with the ark. It was such a big risk, though, that David consulted with all Israel first, and in verse 4 they agreed to gather themselves at Kiriath Jearim to accompany the ark as it was being transported, quote, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. Verse 5. So David assembled all Israel together from the Shihor, the brook of Egypt, even to the entrance of Hamath, to bring God's ark from Kiriath Jearim. David went up with all Israel to Baalah, that is to Kiriath Jearim, which belonged to Judah, to bring up from there God Yahweh's ark that sits above the cherubim, which is called by the name. They carried God's ark on a new cart and brought it out of Abinadab's house, and Uzzah and Ahio drove the cart. David and all Israel played before God with all their might, even with songs, with harps, with stringed instruments, with tambourines, with cymbals, and with trumpets. Comment: so far so good. The ark's going down the road on a cart with the sons of Abinadab, Uzzah, and Ahio driving it. 30,000 VIPs from all over Israel are walking with it, celebrating, making music, 2 Samuel 6:1. They must be ignorant of the law of Moses because this isn't the way the ark should be transported. It should be carried on the shoulders of the Levites, using poles on either side of it that Yahweh specified in the design of it, Exodus 25:14, Numbers 4:15, and Deuteronomy 10:8. Carrying it on a cart is another act of disrespect and inexcusable ignorance. No one knew Yahweh was angry until, verse 9. When they came to Chidon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to hold the ark, for the oxen stumbled. Yahweh's anger burned against Uzzah, and he struck him, because he put out his hand on the ark, and he died there before God. Comment: the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah was afraid the ark would be upset, so he reached out his hand to steady the ark and dropped dead. It was seemingly an act of respect, but it was disrespect. Yahweh was already on record saying if you touch anything belonging to the sanctuary, such as the ark, for example, you'll die, Numbers 4:15. So the death of Uzzah was actually Yahweh upholding his word. Yahweh will be coming back to Israel, but it will be on his own terms that he's clearly communicated in the Scripture. Verse 11. David was displeased because Yahweh had broken out against Uzzah. He called that place Perez Uzzah to this day. Comment: Perez Uzzah means outburst against Uzzah. Yahweh broke out against him. It displeased David in verse 11. As 2 Samuel 6:8 puts it, it angered him. Coming up, it also frightened him, verse 12. David was afraid of God that day, saying, "How can I bring God's ark home to me?" So David didn't move the ark with him into David's city, but carried it aside into Obed-Edom the Gittite's house. God's ark remained with the family of Obed-Edom in his house 3 months, and Yahweh blessed Obed-Edom's house and all that he had. Comment: Obed-Edom's house must have been nearby the scene of the tragedy. David left the ark there because he didn't know what else to do with it. In verse 14, over the next 3 months, Obed-Edom was Israel's guinea pig. They watched to see what would happen to him. It turned out that Yahweh blessed him and all that he had. So the ark was a good thing, and the presence of God was a good thing, but only if he's respected. If we disrespect him, it's better for us not to approach him. We might say that communion is the modern-day equivalent of the ark, because the Lord is present in the bread and cup. Quote, "For this reason, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. A person should examine himself first, and in this way let him eat the bread and drink of the cup. For the one who eats and drinks without careful regard for the body eats and drinks judgment against himself. This is why many of you are weak and sick, and quite a few are dead. But if we examined ourselves, we would not be judged." 1 Corinthians 11:27 through 31. 1 Chronicles 14 is next.